Thank you very much. And Mary Elizabeth, I think I want to change my title to Ketchum Analytics Queen. I love that. So I'm so excited to be here to talk to you guys today. I'm going to walk you through a case study that honestly I've been living and breathing, I feel like, for the last year or so. And I'm hopeful that I can share some wisdom and things that I've learned through this process with you all, especially if you are embarking on your own journey in building a comms intelligence system for within your organization or for one of your clients. So to start off, I'd love to just tell you a little bit of story about my client. Hopefully, I think a lot of you will kind of see yourself in this story. But the client that I'll be talking to you about today is a major food commodity board, and they're very data-driven, which is wonderful. Obviously, that's usually the first hurdle that we have to pass with a lot of our clients in getting them to understand the value of data. But previous to a year ago, they were doing a lot of things in silos, a lot of different data-driven projects in pockets. So they weren't necessarily connecting the dots across all the work that they were doing. And they were feeling the pain of that. I think we were feeling the pain of that because they were making decisions with individual pieces of data and not necessarily seeing the full story or the full picture of what the impact could be of their work. And so they came to us with a challenge in helping them figure out how they can better connect the dots across all the different projects that they're doing, all the different work streams that they're in. Being a food commodity board, they do a lot from nutrition to sustainability to production. And obviously, each of those pieces of the puzzle requires a different methodology or a different purpose, but they should be talking to one another and they should be connected. And so the journey we embarked on with them about 12 months ago was building out what we're calling a comms intelligence platform, which is essentially an end-to-end intelligence system that they are now employing and using in all of their comms work to ensure that everything is rooted and grounded in real data. So before we dive into the different steps of how do you build a comms intelligence platform, I do want to start with an understanding of what an end-to-end intelligence system really is. So it's an integrated, data-driven approach that keeps your audience and your industry at the center of everything you do. It's about understanding what matters most to your audiences, tracking what's happening in your industry, and using that intelligence to drive your communication strategy so that everything you do is grounded in reality. And through this process, you're continuously listening. You're tracking your audience needs and industry shifts in real time, and that intelligence is feeding directly into your strategy and execution. So every decision is informed by what's actually happening. And when your data or when your communication strategy is rooted in real audience and industry insights, it becomes more relevant, more resonant, and more effective. And we've seen that come true through this process with our client. So diving into the steps. So there's 4 steps. And to me, the first step is the most important. This is where you define your intelligence need, because if you build a comms intelligence platform or system that's not rooted in answering these key questions and understanding what's your organization's or what's your client's intelligence gaps, then it's not really solving for anything. You're just building data and integrating data for no real reason. And so within this step, it's really a conversation that you have with your clients or within your own organization with different stakeholders. And these key questions are meant to help us uncover what is a system meant to actually inform and what role is it going to play and what intelligence gap are you actually trying to fill. So some of the key questions include, what is your biggest challenge right now in demonstrating the value of communications? This helps you understand what's keeping your stakeholders up at night, what's troubling them when it comes to showing the value of their work. The second question is, when you need insights, where do you go? And does that source give you what you need? One thing that I think is really important with this is it's not about throwing everything away. It's not about starting from zero. If you have data tools that are working for you, amazing, lean into them. But this question is meant to help us understand what's working and what's not. And for what's not, we start to fill those gaps and understand what new is needed in your system. The third one is one of my favorites because it's really, really concrete. What's a decision you made in the last quarter that you wish you had better data for? This is a real life example that then you can start to go back and map, how could we have done that better, or how could we have better solved for that issue in the moment? And then jumping down to the last one here, what would success look like to you in year one? This is really, really important, especially for those of us that work with clients, and helping to ensure that we're building something that is going to be successful and meeting all your KPIs and all your needs. Because without this question, you could be building something, and at the end of the day, you're not really able to show the value of it. So thinking about how we did this for our client, when we had this conversation with them, 3 key things came to light, became obvious that they were looking to build this comms intelligence system to solve for. First is protecting and driving their industry's reputation. For anyone who works in the food space, particularly in the United States right now, it's very tumultuous. There's a lot going on. And so it's important that they are on their front foot when it comes to issues, that they're able to identify and detect them early, but also it's important that we're able to identify opportunities early. Trends move so quickly, particularly in the food space. And if you're able to optimize those in the right moment, amazing. If you're not paying attention, if you're not tracking it, you're gonna miss it in an instant. And so that was the first key thing that we were trying to solve for with this system. The second one is being on your front foot when it comes to AI. We've had a lot of discussion about AI, and I would say through my experience, food is one of the most important places, that, or one of the most important topics that AI is playing a role in. We know a lot of consumers these days are going to AI, whether it's to plan their meals for the day, look at different recipes, ask questions about nutrition and health and wellness. And so it's important that our client understood what was being said about them across these AI channels, where that information was coming from, and use that information to strategize on how they could better show up, have more visibility, have more positive representation of their food across AI channels. And then the third was being flexible and easy for their industry partners to adapt. So as a food board, they don't work in a silo. They have a lot of partners that they're responsible to, a lot of stakeholders that they have to report out to, who need to be able to take the intelligence coming out of this system and apply it and adapt it to their own organization, their own company, their own brands. And so it was important that we're not really rigid in anything that's coming out of this, that everything we're developing is easily flexible and easily adaptable for their partners. Otherwise, it won't have any value to them. And so out of this came our key mission, which is really the North Star of everything we do with this comms intelligence system for this client. So for this client, our mission was anticipate change, shape understanding, protect trust in an AI-powered digital world so their industry community is represented accurately wherever people seek information. So you'll see this come up a few times throughout my presentation because we really treat this as our North Star and tie everything back to this mission. If it's not serving the mission, it's not needed in this system, essentially. So step 2. Now that you've aligned on your need, you need to identify the data sources that are going to fill those intelligence gaps. And again, this is not about having the most data. It's about ensuring that you have the right data from the right tools. And it's also not about throwing everything away that you were already doing. Our client and our work with them, we had a lot of data sources that were really relevant already to our comms intelligence mission. And so we didn't necessarily just go away with it because we were starting over. We were able to then align those data sources that we already had to the different aspects of our comms intelligence platform. But then we identified the gaps where we didn't have relevant or accurate data. And then we were able to go back and identify where do we get that data, how do we get that data. Another important thing with this step is it's important that for every data source you need to fulfill your comms intelligence mission, you have one source of truth. I've seen many times where you may be working with a client and they have one team that uses one tool for social listening, another team that uses another tool for social listening, and you both share a report that are slightly different, and it drives a lot of arguments and a lot of distrust in what you're saying because no one understands what the source of truth is. And so it's really important that for every data source that you are compiling for your system, you have one source of truth that everybody can agree on so that everybody's speaking the same language when they're looking at any of the reports that you develop as a result of this system. And again, it's not about having a million tools. It's not about having the fanciest tools or the most expensive tools. It's about having the right data and the right tools for your need. So here's what this looked like for a client. We had 4 main components of their intelligence system: risk and opportunity identification, managing reputation in the world of LLMs, testing and verifying our approach, and monitoring and measuring impact. And for each of these, we kind of took a landscape of what data do we have already and what data do we need to fulfill that need. So when we look at risk and opportunity identification, that's what I was talking about a moment ago in terms of being able to quickly and have early detection of any possible issues that might be bubbling up in their landscape. So for this phase, or this pillar of our comms intelligence platform, it was really important that we were not only looking at sources online, but offline as well. So you'll see in terms of the different data sources that we look here, well, yes, we look at traditional and social media, we also look at policy discussions and research papers, because in the food space, that's where a lot of issues start to bubble up before they even reach the main consumer or the main, your target audiences. So if we're able to identify issues at that phase of the development of the issue, we're able to build a plan and strategize on that really early before it becomes a full-blown issue. Within managing reputation in the new world of LLMs, we're obviously doing some GEO analysis there, which we've talked a lot about today already, but we're really tracking and measuring our generative search visibility, our favorability, content citations to inform our AI strategy, which I'll talk about in a moment. Testing and verifying our approaches. This is probably our client's favorite piece of this, because we've built out synthetic audiences based on their real audience data. So they have a few different target audiences that they care about. And it's obviously very expensive to go out and message test every single time we have a new campaign or every time an issue comes up. And so we've been able to build out these synthetic audiences that allow us to very quickly and in real time test messages, test campaign strategy based on real consumer data. And then the last piece is monitoring and measuring impact. So this is where our true listening piece comes in. Obviously, we have listening involved in our risk and opportunity identification phase, but we also have traditional and social media volume that we're tracking. We look at share of voice, which is not my favorite, but many of our clients love it. We look at search data, and then we also look at generative search content tracking there as well. So step 3, and honestly, this is the step where I feel like I've had the most struggles, so I'm hoping everyone can learn from my struggles on this. It's establishing your workflows and processes, and I think a lot of people skip this step, and it's probably one of the most important steps. You need to know, or if your intelligence doesn't reach the right people who actually are making the decisions, it dies. You can have the perfect data, you can have the best tools, but if there's no clear workflow connecting your intelligence to action, it sits in a dashboard somewhere and no one is looking at it. So within this phase, a few key questions that you need to answer are: who's collecting the data, who's analyzing it, who generates the insights, who's communicating those insights, and ultimately who's acting on them. Who's the most important person who's going to take that data and action on it. And there's a lot of different matrices you can use when thinking about building out your workflow, aligning on your research, or on your roles and responsibilities. A personal favorite of mine, which Mary Elizabeth hears me say all the time, is a RACI framework. And if you're not familiar with the RACI framework, it stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. It's just one I like. There's many that you can research and choose which one works best for you. But I found that this has been really helpful in ensuring that everyone knows their role in this process and nothing is getting stuck in one phase or another. And if I'm being honest, we didn't build a good workflow for this client when we first built their comms intelligence platform. We really had no workflow for this client when we first built the comms intelligence platform. And we had a lot of struggles. We were missing deadlines. We didn't really understand who was the final decision maker in our reporting and our deliverables. And we had people stepping on people's toes a lot. And it was causing a lot of internal conflict. And so we took a step back and we were like, we need to fix this. We need to build out a really, really clear workflow, because as I walked you through earlier, we do have 4 key work streams within this comms intelligence platform, and they're all happening at the exact same time. They're all happening in parallel. We have deliverables that are due across all of them, probably every single week. And so it was important that we had clear leaders and clear ownership within each of them. So for each work stream, you'll see we built out a work stream lead, a work stream support. In some cases, we have data and tool leads as well who are responsible for ensuring that all the data is clean, it's flowing through its systems properly as needed. But then we also built a leadership team on top of that. So this team helps ensure that everything we're doing is connected back to the client needs and the business leads. We have our client director who is talking to our clients every day. She actually sits on site with them. So she's able to give us real-time insights as to what conversations they're having with the clients, what struggles are they seeing. She's ensuring that we're always connecting back there. We have senior leaders at our agency who help provide institutional knowledge across the board and help connect the dots across these different work streams. And then, to me, the most important piece is our project manager. And honestly, a project manager role is not a role that I've worked with much in my career, and we've been starting to implement it more. And I think it's one of the most important because not only do they ensure that we're staying on budget, they ensure that we're staying on timeline, they ensure that everybody is completing the responsibilities within each of their roles, and that everything is kind of continues to flow through the system as needed. And I will say, since we've built this out, everything has been way more smooth and way more clear. We have not missed any deadlines. We've been able to stay on track, not always stay on budget, but we try. And so that's why I think this is the most important step to me, because I've personally seen the true impact of having a clear workflow in place. And then the last step, which is the step that I think most people are most excited for, is aligning on your outputs. Honestly, this is usually the most fun step, so this is where you get to build your beautiful dashboards and the compelling reports and visualizations. And I think a mistake that a lot of people make is starting here, because it's the most fun piece of the pie, in my opinion. But if you start here, you're really building your outputs in a vacuum. And they won't drive decisions, they'll just be pretty, and they won't be strategic. And so a few key questions you need to ask yourself when you're aligning and building out your outputs are, what does each stakeholder need to know? Not what could the data tell us or what data points could you include in here, but what do they actually need to understand to drive action and change that report is meant to drive? When do they need to know it? Timing is really important. I'm sure everybody knows this. A lot of the data we work with can become irrelevant in a few hours, in a few days, in a month. So understanding the relevancy of your data and then the timing of the decisions that need to be made based on that data can then help guide when the timing of the reports that you're building out. And then finally, what decision are they making with this data, with this report? And if you can't answer that, you don't really have a strategic output, and it's not really gonna help drive any change or any action for your stakeholders. So here's how we built this for our clients. And the one thing I want to say is our clients, as we said earlier, they have a lot of partners that they work with. And the value that they often see themselves bringing to their partners is outputs. So a conversation we needed to have with them was not having the most outputs and ensuring that the outputs that we developed were really strategic and tied back to our mission, because they came to us and they wanted a million things for every phase of this. They wanted a quarterly report, a monthly report, a weekly report, and we kind of had to take a step back and say, why? What is the purpose of each of those reports? And thankfully, we were able to kind of pare it back to what we deem to be the most important. So when we look at our risk and opportunity identification, we have two key outputs from this work stream. First is our biweekly emerging trends report. And many of you might be saying, biweekly for trends, those aren't gonna be relevant anymore. But what was important for this client was how quickly they were realistically able to act on some of these trends. Again, they have a lot of partners and a lot of people they have to inform and consult with before they can act on anything. And so that's why we landed on biweekly, because it was the most relevant to the way that they work internally. And it ensured that what we were delivering to them was still relevant from a trends perspective. We also have a monthly issues report where we're able to trend the regular issues that they track over time, which helps us start to predict and see around corners. But then on top of that, we do have real-time issues reporting, because obviously when a big issue arises, you can't wait a month to report on it. You need it right now, today, probably yesterday. And so it's important that we have that layer and that the two talk to one another. Within our second phase here, or pillar here, we have managing reputation in the new world of LLMs. This is where our GEO audits come into play. We actually just finished this, our first round of this. We did a huge kind of landscape analysis within generative AI and looked at 8 different topics. So think about health and sustainability and production. And we're able to really benchmark where they're currently showing up, what's driving their visibility, what's driving their favorability across these platforms. And we're currently using those insights to then build out an AI strategy plan for them that once that gets implemented, we're gonna rerun this and start to measure the impact of that work and of that strategy on how they're showing up across the LLMs. I already talked a little bit about the third one. It's not really an output, it's more of a tool. That's where our synthetic audiences come into play. Our clients love these. They love to play with them. They love to showcase them to their stakeholders. They're really fancy, but they're also built on really strong data, both syndicated, primary research. And so they're really, at least in our experience in testing them, they really do align with the real consumer reaction when we're testing messages or content strategy. So they've been really valuable in ensuring that we're not just putting out content that we think aligns with our audiences, we're really testing and validating that. And then the last piece is monitoring and measuring impact. So this is where things like our daily monitoring report come into play, where they're able to see the real output of their, or outcome of their, excuse me, earned media outreach, as well as what's happening in the landscape. And then finally, we have these ongoing analyses. So one of them is a share of voice analysis. We also do some quarterly reporting where we can really show the aggregate impact of their comms strategy, as well as the impact of this intelligence system as a whole. So to bring all of this together, if you are looking to build a comms intelligence platform or system for your client or within your organization, the 4 key steps include defining your intelligence need, so getting really crystal clear on what questions you're trying to answer with the system. Step 2, identifying your data sources, mapping out where the intelligence you need actually lives, and ensuring that you have one source of truth for each data source. Step 3, establishing your workflows and processes, knowing who's responsible for what, who's analyzing, who's deciding, and making your roles really crystal clear. And then step 4, aligning and designing on your outputs. So ensuring that all of your outputs tie back to your strategic needs for your stakeholders. One output probably doesn't serve all of your needs, and being really thoughtful on the output design and timing to ensure that real action can be taken as a result of what you're building and delivering. So this is what that looked like for our client. You can see we have our mission at the top, ensuring that everything ties back to this idea of the goal of what the system was meant to achieve. So anticipate change, shape understanding, and protect trust in an AI-powered digital world so their industry community is represented accurately wherever people seek information. You can clearly see how the different pillars and the role of each of the pillars ties back to that mission, as well as the different data sources and outputs that we deliver as a result of each of them. And this process has really changed the game for our client. Like I said at the beginning, they were doing a lot of things in silos and the data was not talking to each other. This process has ensured that we are much more data-driven and strategic in our comms approach. And it's allowed us to have some really great conversations with our client about where they should be showing up, how they should be showing up. That's not just based on our opinion, that's based on real data that we're gathering through this platform. And that is it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Analytics Queen. I'm sure we've got some questions in the room. There's a couple here. Callum's going to come around with the mic. I've got one for you, which has always fascinated me. Like the amount of times I've heard from comms people that when they ask the client the question, why, it's like they've never been asked before. Like, why are we doing this? Yeah. Exactly. Is that, what kind of response do you get to that?
Well, so for this example specifically, the why was really grounded in this idea that they felt their value to their partners was in outputs. So it wasn't really tied to a strategic decision that they were trying to make or anything like that. It was very much like, oh, well, this is how we show value. This is what our partners expect from us, our 1 million outputs. And so that really helped us drive a conversation that was tied back to what strategic decisions are we trying to make with this data, and what strategic decisions will your partners make with this data, more importantly. And then once we had that conversation and started asking those questions, they were able to better realize that delivering 1 million reports a week is not helping anybody, and it's more value. It's more like the quantity over quality, or quality over quantity discussion, that if they provide higher quality reports over more reports, then they're actually providing a lot more value to their partners.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Right, questions in the room.
So question one about synthetic audiences. Super interesting area, difficult. I'm interested to hear more color how you went on about to create it, and if you have had chance so far to validate it. Like, does it seem to work, this type of testing on a synthetic audience? It's super interesting.
Yeah, I will admit, we have a lot of people at my agency who are a lot more smart on synthetic audiences than I am, but essentially what we do is we ensure that the data that you put into it, your synthetic audience is only as good as the data you put into it. So if you don't have real audience data on your target audience, then building a synthetic audience isn't really gonna do anything for you. And having that real data is what allows us to validate it, because essentially we spend a lot of time asking these synthetic audiences a lot of questions that we then tie back to or compare to the previous research that we've done. So in a lot of cases, we have qualitative research, primary research, syndicated research that we're using to kind of correlate and build these audiences off of. And in our experience, the synthetic audiences that have the most robust and rich data sets are the most successful. Obviously, they all hallucinate. It takes a little bit of time to tweak it and get it to the right place. But as long as you're inputting really strong data on your target and real data on your target audiences, and then spending a lot of time validating and testing it against that research, we found them to be very, very accurate, almost to a scary degree sometimes.
Thanks, Lauren. And I think we've got one more question in the middle of the room.
Great presentation, Lauren. Well done. I really loved your point when you talked about establishing the workflows and process and the challenges that you face there. I'm interested to get your perspective on commitment, right? Because I think in setting those workflows and having it aligned to those different internal as well as client stakeholders, there's a commitment to then living up to using the data as it's intended to drive decision-making, et cetera. So was that part of the challenge that you faced? And if so, how did you address that with your client?
Yes, I definitely think that was a challenge. And I think the challenge was both getting a commitment internally and externally, because what we found for a while is we were delivering on different pieces of the comms intelligence platform to our client and not hearing a response back. And so it took us a little bit of time in a conversation we had to have with them to say, we need your input. We need to understand how you're going to use these outputs to really ensure that they're as strategic as possible. And then internally, a commitment to everybody to serve their role it was a little bit of a challenge, and it took a little bit of, I think, massaging. And honestly, that was a lot of my role on this account as well, to ensure that everybody was playing the role that they were expected to play, and that it took a little bit of maybe strong-arming some people sometimes to say, hey, you're not the final decision here. You don't need to be reviewing this, or I need your eyes on this. You are the final decision maker here. So it took time, for sure. But I think it really paid off in the end having those discussions, because I think where we've landed is a much smoother process and therefore much more impactful deliverables for our client.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.